Hi, everyone. Here's another episode of the Heard Women Empowering Women. I'm so excited today. I have Dr. Michelle Maidenberg, and she wrote the award-winning book, Ace Your Life and Unleash Your Best Self and Live That Life. And I think you've done a TED Talk on circumventing emotional avoidance. So she has a lot of things that we need to hear about and talk about. So let you introduce yourself. Anything you want to say about yourself?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, first of all. So I have a private practice in Harrison, New York. And I also have a nonprofit organization called Through My Eyes, which is THRU My Eyes. And it offers free clinically guided videotaping for chronically medically ill individuals who want to leave a video legacy for their children and loved ones.
Oh, that's awesome. What an awesome idea to do that.
So I videotaped over 300 people at this point. Actually, this coming Friday, I'm going to be doing 2 more videotapes, unfortunately. And, people who contact me, really, really appreciate the fact that they're able to put a video, and leave a living legacy. And I'm so happy to be able to provide that service right now. And I'm going to just put a little pitch, but, restructuring the organization. And I'm really looking, for board members and people who are really, really passionate about the mission. And I'm very happy to speak to anybody who, seriously wants to get involved. So I'm just.
So your website is?
Well, my website is, www.michellemaidenberg.com, which Michelle's 2 L's, Maidenberg is MAIDENBERG. And you could always look up my book, which is Ace Your Life, Unleash Your Best Self, and Live the Life You Want, in case you forget my name.
No, so can they just contact you through the website about that?
Yeah,
exactly. That's wonderful. So it's so funny because I wrote, since the pandemic, I wrote 3 books. Never wrote before, just that happened. And I have the podcast. So my children and my grandchildren kind of ignore it, that it's out there. But hearing you talk, I thought, well, maybe after I pass, and then they'll want to go and see. Yeah. But it's out there. Once you put it out there,
completely.
Love about the internet.
Yeah. The other thing, which, just to piggyback what you're saying, over the pandemic, what I also started doing is I started a YouTube channel and I offer weekly guided meditations. So I post it. Yeah. And then I'm a blogger for Psychology Today. So I'm also always posting articles on a variety of different topics.
Love that. Well, I'll be looking up, that's for sure. And your acronym of your book, ACE, Acceptance, Compassion, and Empowerment. And I thought, well, that's synchronicity because that's my brand. Women empowering women. So this is great. I'm really excited to talk to you. So let's start off with, let's talk about our inner critic, because we all have one, right? And what do you think about that?
Well, I think it varies from person to person. And it's, it's interesting that we call it an inner critic, because I don't really think it's a critic. It's actually, a medium by which we protect ourselves. And when we say it's a critic, there's a really negative connotation, as if we should ward it off, or we should apologize for it, or we should, kind of, let's say, even distance from that part of ourselves. And I want to say that every part of each of us is okay, enough, and worthy. And worthy of acceptance, So I don't like to necessarily call it an inner critic. So I'm going to say that. But it is, our brains are wired to protect us, again, from danger and discomfort. And it does everything in its power. And this is a structural neurocognitive function. It's not just something we decide we're going to do. It's actually something that gets done because it's something that is humanistic. It's part of our core. It's the way, right? We have a reptilian brain. We've been doing that since the, Stone Ages.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So when I have clients and patients who have severe or intense, anxiety,
Mm.
they actually despise and have a very negative relationship with their minds. And they say to themselves, why do I perseverate? And why do I overthink? And why do I worry? And et cetera, et cetera. And then they have feelings about the feelings. They have thoughts about the feelings. They have, feelings about the feeling. I could go on and on and on. And
Rat on a maze. Yeah.
it becomes a very self-deprecating cycle that they get themselves into. And then guess what happens to the anxiety? It intensifies and intensifies and intensifies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like what I teach, people I work with is actually to appreciate and have gratitude for their mind. They wouldn't want it any other way. It also connects them to their values and what's important to them. And we need that reminder.
When you said about the brain protects us, it's in my book. I had some trauma, and I won't go into it here, but from maybe 5 years old to 12, I have no memories of my childhood or anything. And when I was doing work on myself, I had gone to this one psychiatrist and I said, why don't you hypnotize me? Well, he was unable to hypnotize me. And I said, darn. And he said, you might not remember because your brain is protecting you.
That's
Like
right.
maybe there was some trauma that you really couldn't handle. So your brain is just wiping that out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I agree with that.
I want to actually give you an extreme example, which has been, I mean, I have so many examples of it, but I had a patient I was working with, and I was working with her for many, many years. And unfortunately and tragically, her daughter, her young adult daughter was killed in a bus accident, which was just so devastating. It was one of three children and her only daughter. And yes, and this is somebody, again, I knew her daughter too. I met her daughter personally. We had some family sessions where her daughter was present. So I actually felt connected to her, and also just to this person. And she came in week after week. And the thing that disturbed her the most is what happened to her daughter the minute or when she died. What happened on impact? Did she feel pain? Did she have a moment that she felt distress, pain, etc.? And that she kept on perseverating over and perseverating over because she couldn't tolerate thinking and feeling that her daughter was suffered somehow. And what was amazing, and I was able to give her this feedback because I know about the brain and neuroscience. And I also work with a lot of police officers and some who actually do traffic, work and so forth, and actually emergency services. So they're there during accidents and so forth. And one of the things that I know is when we have a traumatic accident, we go into shock.
Yes.
What does that mean? Our brain literally, our body usually shuts down. It literally shuts down. That's why after tragic accidents, people don't remember details of the accidents, etc. Or we disassociate. We also disassociate because the pain is just too traumatic. And I said to her, I said, your daughter probably did not feel or think anything. Because the second that, because again, the way that it happened, the accident was so devastating and traumatic, it's evident that her body had to have gone into shock. There's no way, and also she probably died instantaneously also, but, and I could see just by watching her, like in a matter of minutes, you could see how she was able to have some relief.
She could finally wrap her mind around it, like just get that. Right. Yeah, because
in her last moments. Yeah.
But I mean, the mother could finally, realize and have a way to deal with that painful experience.
Well, so that's to an extreme. That's what our brain does, which speaks to what you just said. Like your brain, right, very, very like generously, and I mean that, was protecting you. Like what an incredible brain you have. What a generous brain you have. Literally.
Thank you. Well, I think too, like when people that have read my biography and know me just from the last maybe 20 years of my life and knew nothing, they say to me, you should be a bitter old woman. with all the things you went through, but you're not. I don't know. I think I always had that the will, the drive, the desire to become, not say, oh, this is me. Does that make sense? Like I'm always in a state of becoming.
Well, you're not fixated and, consumed by your identity, right? You don't identify a certain way. So you leave room and flexibility for cultivating yourself, and I could relate to you too, because people always say to me, just based on my history, they always say to me, I can't believe how much you accomplished and what you did, right? Like somebody like you would, who knows what they would end up. And I feel the same way. I feel like I had, since I was a little tiny child, I remember like the resilience. And I also was, the one thing that I think saved me, so to speak, is my resourcefulness. I
Yes.
always managed to get out of what I needed to get out of and to find and connect to resources. And I always had an older, or a woman, I would say a woman, right? Who always mentored me in some way and who showed me special love and care.
Yeah.
So I believed I was worthy. I believed that at my core. And that allowed me to really, succeed. I believe that. And actually in my book, in the dedication, it's dedicated to all my woman warriors.
Yes. Yes. I like that because it's true. And I think uncomfortable emotions and things that you might not have dealt with, we keep them like stuffed down and everything. That's where addiction comes into play. At least it did for me. I never thought I would be an alcoholic ever because my father was an alcoholic. So the last thing I wanted to do was be like him. But I know now that I was self medicating and I was self medicating anxiety and depression, and my tolerance was large, and then it became more and more and more and more and more and more and consumed me, you know.
Yeah.
So don't you think that addictions are really based on traumas and things we haven't dealt with sometimes?
I mean, so many things. And by the way, there's little T's and big T's. Okay. We all have experienced trauma to some extent. Okay. So I really do. It is a universal thing, right? And again, it depends on you, right? So I know for myself, one of my adaptations and coping mechanisms growing up was shutting down. Literally, I could become stone cold, so to speak, and I could literally ward off my feelings, and that helped me to survive. And I could definitely go into like the survival mode. And when that happens, it becomes literally all about me and my survival. And that's all that I care about, again, on a subconscious level, because it's not on a conscious level at all. Right. Because that's not who I am and who I want to be. And I literally, I repress my feelings in those moments and I just survive. And unfortunately, what ends up happening, and I'm putting this out there because I'm in therapy and working on myself, but what ends up happening sometimes is I have a hard time tapping into my compassion or my connection because I'm so busy surviving that I literally lose sight of the person, who I'm with. Yeah.
Oh wow, that makes sense. And so how can we, even though we have our own stuff we're working on, but how can we mentor women that we know that have past negative experiences, and how can we help them to create a life and leave? I don't know if I say leave behind, but not make them such a big thing. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. So,
like feel them every day or go back there and sit in it.
well, I think what you're really speaking to is acting them out, right? It comes out in our behaviors. That's part of the issue. Our coping mechanisms, our adaptations come out very directly in our behaviors. And we use those skills when we're kids because they actually help us to survive. And then what we do is we take that little suitcase with us as we grow older and develop, but they don't quite work the same way when we're older. Just yesterday, I had a kid, she's not so much of a kid. She's 15, so a high school student here in my office. And, one of her adaptations is she literally, and it comes from anxiety and a whole host of different things, but it affects her relationships because she cuts off her feelings and she also doesn't assert herself and she doesn't express her needs.
Mm.
And what ends up happening, unfortunately, is people misunderstand her. They kind of take her for being intimidating, and they also take her for being kind of cold and cut off. And while that has worked great for her as a kid, and it has worked, it's starting to not work so great anymore because she's getting into, again, more formative years. Her relationships are a lot more sophisticated now, and they're going to get even more sophisticated.
Right.
And if she doesn't really learn, right, how to tap into those feelings and act in a way that's more connected and vulnerable, she's going to have real serious issues in her relationships as she develops. And we talked about that openly.
Good.
And I kind of, and I even said to her, it was so interesting. I said to her, how about your family? Like, your sibling, your parents, like, do you find the same type of kind of coping? And she was like, I don't know. And then she was like, well, kind of. And then she started thinking about it. She was like, actually, I go, you know what? Let's do an experiment. I said, go home this week and I want you really to study them and to see how they cope with emotions. And you come back and you report back to me what you find. And she was like, right, because I wanted to really kind of engage her, and she was all about it. She was so excited.
Did you hear from her yet? Did you get the report?
Well, I saw her yesterday, so I'm going to see her next week. I'll get the report next week. But so for women who are acting out, like you just said, the most important thing is really noticing and having awareness in their consciousness and in the present moment, because what ends up happening, unfortunately, 95% of the way we function is in our unconscious. And we're on automatic until we bring it into our consciousness. We're going to kind of always act out on it. And I know I find myself as therapized as I am, and as intuitive as I am, and etc. I'm in my unconscious all the time. I'm still working on it. I'm a work in progress.
Me too. And I was the oldest child of 4, and I pretty much feel like I raised my siblings from a very early age, which I did. And so my coping mechanism was always to be in control, be the boss, take care. I will run the show. I'll tell you what to do, and it'll be great. So whenever there's a situation and they say, oh, do we have anybody that wants to volunteer? My hand goes, right up, I'll volunteer. And then I have to be the chairperson because, so in my life, to my daily life, it's like, I want things to go a certain way. And I plan my day, and usually it's fine. But boy, if things don't go my way, I can get very anxious. So that I know that's my thing, that, but I'm aware of it. Like you said, have to be aware. Once you're aware, at least you know what to do.
Well, not always so much, because we could be aware. We could be aware of it. And I know, again, I find this happens with me too. We could be aware of it, but keep in mind, it's part of our neural networks.
Yeah.
Okay. It becomes integrated into our neurophysiology. Yeah. Okay. So as much as we want to make changes sometimes, and as much as we're aware of it, it's easier said than done. Okay.
I have to very actively, what you said, practice that on 2 boards. And I am getting a little better at just biting my tongue, just pause, realize I don't have to solve every problem. Even if I know the answer, I don't have to, because what happens is sometimes people get irritated with you because you're always saying, oh, well, here's the solution. Here's what you should do. And it's better to let them just do, you know what I'm saying? So I have to work on that. I'm working on it.
Yeah. Well, and then sometimes you could be misunderstood, right? Because you could be seen as bossy or controlling or off-putting
or trying to make them look bad, because their insecurities sometimes it's like, oh, I'm doing this wonderful job. If that person does not like me, she seems annoyed with me. Well, because maybe she used to do that job and you're doing it better, and she feels like you're, that. And even though that's not my intention, like you said,
which is a projection, right? That's a projection. What you just mentioned is a projection. So that happens all the time. So we have to be really in tune with ourselves because we have to also kind of understand how we come across to others,
Exactly.
our body language, etc. But, part of why I wrote my book is, part of it is acceptance. Now, when I say acceptance, it's not about, oh, I love myself and I'm terrific and, etc. But it's more about noticing who you are and what your struggles are and what your challenges are. And again, unconditionally, right?
Like what I just said, I know that need to control is one of my issues. So I'm aware of it.
Well, and also keep in mind, and I could relate to that too, because I'm the oldest child too. And that's probably why I have done as much as I have done, because of the need to be successful and etc., affirmation and all of that. Right. But it's noticing it. And it's also, right, like your willingness to really look at it and observe it and study it and evaluate it. Right. And to learn about it and also to flex, right? So that we tend to be more in this rigid space, but like, how could we flex so that we could ask ourselves questions like, how else can I see this? Or what could be another explanation for this? Or trying to see the other person on the other end, right? Like what could be going on for them?
Exactly. So we're going into the self-compassion part of the book too. When you talk about compassion, you also totally are talking about self-compassioning yourself.
Yes. Yes. We learn how to be compassionate towards others. That's what life's all about.
Yes.
Right. Say please, say thank you, etc. Right. We're always learning, and we're taught that from when we're young, in school with our parents. Whoever teaches us to be self-compassionate, it doesn't happen. There's no prescriptive way that we're taught to be self-compassionate. And what does that even mean? How do you do that? Like, we don't even have an understanding of what we need to do in order to be self-compassionate. Right. And also we get fearful that if we're too self-compassionate, we're going to become complacent, which is completely a myth.
Yeah, well, I know growing up that I heard all the time, don't cry. What are you crying for? Don't cry. Like any emotion, you're kind of stifled, and it's like, oh, what do you feel sorry for yourself? That kind of thing. Like you're trained just the opposite, to be like a little soldier.
Yes, yes. And it's actually those parts that need the most compassion. So, for example, the controlling part from, myself, right? That's the part that helped me survive my whole life. Right. So how hard is it if you think about it, to kind of, again, to give that up when I feel like that's my survival, number one. Number two, I could also appreciate that part, and also recognize that I need to flex. And I could also appreciate that that is a part of me that helped me survive, that helped me, gain my success, but I don't need it anymore to the same extent that I needed it when I was a kid, let's say.
Right. So we have self-acceptance, we have self-compassion. And if we can get to that, we'll be more content, and we'll be have more potential for a good life. Right?
Yes. Growth.
For growth, yeah.
Expansion.
Like
expansion
that.
is important. Yes.
And what gets in our way besides what we just talked about?
Oh gosh. Well, part of what I wrote, which I always think is important, is the beginning of each chapters talks about the barriers. And it focuses solely on the barriers. What keeps us from getting acceptance, compassion, empowerment? And then the second part of it is like what we need to do in order to acquire it. There's so many things that get in the way. Gosh. And I don't think we have enough time to talk about that.
No, we'll have to do another show for that one.
Yes.
But I mean,
however,
I do understand.
We have a lot working against us, both interpersonally, in our environment, the way we were raised, based on who we are, our personality, and I could go on and on and on and on. Okay, even being a female, like being my gender, my race, my religion. It's vast.
It is vast. It is vast. Yeah, I agree, because I know for me, before alcohol, my only way to escape. Well, my book is called Raised by Wolves, Trapped by Demons. So the wolves were my parents, and the men, before my husband, were the demons. And it's true.
Wow.
I was out in
I
that
like that
world.
title.
You like the title? Well, I'll have
Yeah,
to
I
send
love
you a
it.
copy. Do you have Kindle?
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, okay, then I can't send it to you. You have to buy it.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the
Sure.
thing of it is, yeah, I had no coping skills. I wasn't taught any of those things we're talking about. And
Yeah.
I looked to other people for validation. And of course, I attracted toxic men. I call it toxic masculinity. So I had two very controlling husbands in a row. Okay. And when I divorced the second one, he would not acknowledge that we were divorced. He stalked me and he was violent. And I ended up remarrying my first husband for protection. I
Wow.
know, it's saying it, but if when you read the book,
Yeah.
you'll say, yeah, that's what she had to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my husband now, we're together 34 years. So it was
Wow.
them, not me. Okay. But,
It's the first husband that you're still
no,
married
no,
to?
no, no, no. It's
Oh,
my
okay.
first. The one I
Okay.
married twice. He was to protect me. And it had
Okay.
been 10 years since we were together. And a leopard does not change its spots. He didn't get better, he got worse. So it took me another 6 years to decide to get him out of there. But getting sober, I mean, I wasn't sober when I married my third husband, and he wasn't either. And I really believe if we didn't get sober, that we might not be together 34 years. Oh,
Yeah.
we have to have another one. With this one so fast. It's like
I know.
into
I know.
the
I'm
end
happy to come
already.
back. I'm always happy to come back on. No
Well,
problem.
you just handle so many things like mindfulness and relationships and how we feel about ourselves, like so many things. So we're going to have to pick just one of those things and hone in on it. Okay.
Yes,
This
absolutely.
was wonderful. And
Yeah.
I really want young women to find the podcast. That's why I'm doing reels on TikTok in places I never would be,
Yes.
because I had a couple women, young women, come back to me, and they
Wow.
really, really got something out of it.
That's so nice.
So
Yeah,
we're
you're doing
both
a good
doing what we're
thing.
supposed to do to help each other.
Absolutely. I believe that. I mean, I love what I do, and I have such passion for people and
Yes.
uh, for
Yeah.
for growth.
Well, let's keep fighting the good fight because we
Yeah,
need to, because this empowerment is absolutely needed in today's world.
absolutely.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you. It's so nice meeting
We are
you.
going to do this again.
Yes, yes. And thank you for taking the time to actually read my book. I really
Oh,
appreciate
well,
it.
I tried to read all the books, but yes, yours is very good. All right.
Thank
Thank you again.
thank you.